The next presenter will be Roger Gural, a trial attorney with the Consumer Protection Branch of CBP, the United States Department of Justice. He joined CBP in 2006. He handles affirmative and defense civil matters and criminal prosecutions. He has prosecuted cases involving counterfeit pharmaceuticals, internet pharmacies, off-label promotion, and misbranded and adulterated food, drugs, and medical devices. Roger?
Thank you, Chuck. And let's see if we can get to the first slide here. Oh, here we go. Okay. My name is Roger Gural. I'm a trial attorney with the Consumer Protection Branch in the Civil Division of the United States Department of Justice. And what we do in the Consumer Protection Branch is we handle prosecutions, civil and criminal prosecutions of various statutes that are responsible for public safety and health. As an aside, we do cases with the Consumer Product Safety Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, and as it pertains to why we're here today, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And I've never been to China, but we travel a lot. And I've even paid Sam a visit in Texas once or twice. As recently as yesterday, there was an article in the New York Times about consumers purchasing their drugs from Canada because they say they can't afford to obtain those in the United States. And there's been significant pressure on Customs and Border Protection, which is CBP, not to be confused with us, CPB, and also the FDA. They've been noticing pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs coming over from Canadian pharmacies into the United States. And one of the interesting quotes from the article yesterday was from an individual who said that she was comfortable ordering from Canada because she trusted their regulatory system. The problem is that it's very hard to tell what is a legitimate pharmacy and who's a fly-by-night operator. Physicians and sometimes just website operators, they can be ordering from a legitimate supply chain. They could be ordering from unlicensed brokers or wholesalers that they find on the internet. Oftentimes they receive drugs that are not approved for the US market. They receive drugs, as Chuck and Sam have talked about, that have not been stored properly. And they've also received counterfeits. And we're all aware of the dangers of counterfeit medications. They can contain no API. They can either be subpotent, superpotent, or they can contain harmful toxic substances, binding agents that may interfere with the absorption of the API. You can't be assured of what you're going to get. One of the main tools that we have in the Consumer Protection Branch is the FDCA. It contains counterfeit drug provisions such as selling, dispensing, holding for sale, counterfeit drugs, making or selling, mimicking or a drug mark or trademark. Things like that are a prohibited act under the FDCA, and it provides penalties for that. We also deal with misbranded and adulterated food and drug. For misbranded drugs, that includes anything on the labeling that is false or misleading. It also includes things such as if the label does not contain adequate directions for use. There are a whole host of reasons in the regulations of why a drug may be misbranded. Under the FDCA, an adulterated food or drug is commonly when it contains a harmful or deleterious substance. But here, with respect to prescription drugs, if there's something in there that shouldn't be in there, or not enough of it, or too much, such that it differs from the standards set forth in one of the compendia, then we would consider that drug adulterated, which is another prohibited act to introduce any article in interstate commerce or to hold it for sale after its ingredients have been shipped in interstate commerce. Very recently, Congress acted to amend the FDCA to stiffen the penalties for knowingly and intentionally adulterating a drug. The key element there is that the adulteration is knowingly done with a reasonable probability of serious adverse health consequences or death. FDCA also strengthened the penalties for counterfeiting. As you can see there, there's the fine is now $5 million and a 20-year maximum term of imprisonment. The FDCA is not the only tool that we have in the Consumer Protection Branch. We can rely on good old mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit mail fraud and wire fraud, and also conspiracy to commit other offenses under 18 U.S.C. 371. Money laundering is also another tool in our basket. And CPB was called upon to use these tools starting in 2006, culminating in an indictment in June of 2011 of Andrew Strempler, who is a Canadian citizen who was educated and licensed as a pharmacist in Canada. He was the founder, owner, and president of Metaplan Health Consulting, which also did business as rxnorth.com, which is a telephone, mail order, and internet-based pharmacy that was marketing and distributing prescription drugs primarily to U.S. citizens. Around the time frame of 2004, Strempler and RX North began to purchase prescription drugs from brokers outside of Canada. And the reason that he did this is because suppliers in legitimate channels started to realize that they were sending more drugs to Health Canada than legitimately could be purchased. There are only so many people in Canada, and for a given condition, Health Canada was ordering way more product than they needed to. And so they Health Canada began to restrict their sales to RX North, and he began to look elsewhere to obtain his drugs. And so he turned to foreign brokers from countries such as the UAE, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Turkey, and began purchasing product from them. He received no assurances from these brokers that the product was legitimate. He never asked for a pedigree, and Strempler, as a pharmacist, either knew or should have known that what he was buying from these brokers were not approved by any regulatory agency, whether it was Canada, the United Kingdom, or the United States. That didn't stop him from advertising on his website and his brochures that the medicines that United States citizens were purchasing were in fact approved by one or more of those regulatory systems. Around that time period, Strempler started up an operation in the Bahamas. He paid a Bahamian pharmacist $4,000 a month for the use of that pharmacist's license and for the use of their pharmacy in order to import pharmaceuticals and then export them to folks in the United States who had purchased prescriptions through RX North. Strempler instructed these brokers not to refer to RX North or Metaplan on shipping manifests, invoices, when they sent their product to the Bahamas. He also instructed these foreign brokers that when they're shipping the product to the Bahamas, not to have any stopovers in the United States or Canada. And that was primarily because he knew the FDA was going to intercept those shipments and they would lose money. When the product was received in the Bahamas, workers were instructed not to fulfill prescriptions until Strempler himself had looked at pictures of the packaging and had approved the labeling that came with the product. And once he did that, workers were free to use that product to fulfill prescriptions to the United States. Some of the product that came in was foreign labeled. The packaging inserts were not in English. The outside of the packages were not the labeling that was approved by the United States, by the FDA. Strempler also devised and tested with others at RX North shipping routes to customers in the United States that would avoid transiting through the United States. Shippers, such as FedEx, they like to ship things through large hubs, such as the one that's in Miami. And so they went out of their way to ship stuff so that the authorities would not be able to get their hands on it when it came to Miami. So what they did, when a prescription was filled for a U.S. customer, it was placed in an individual envelope with the return address of RX North Canada and the customer's address on that envelope. And when they had enough of those individual prescriptions, they would throw those into a large box, bulk ship that to either the United Kingdom or the Netherlands Antilles, and waiting for those shipments was a drop shipper who would open up the box, put the postage on the individual product, drop it in the mail. And so these individual packets were coming through customs one by one from the UK to the United States or the Netherlands Antilles to the United States. At some point in June of 2006, somebody screwed up. They sent 2 of these large boxes through FedEx. They transited through Miami, and they were intercepted by customs. Those were en route to those drop shippers in the United Kingdom and also the Netherlands Antilles. It contained around 800 individual packages for customers that were, some of whom lived in South Florida. FDA ended up testing about a third of that shipment. 90% of what they tested was not consistent with the authentic product. It was counterfeit. And I've looked at those medications. I mean, I'm not a pharmacist, but I would be hard pressed to tell what was counterfeit and what was not, and we all know that. And these were very good. Among the drugs that were in the 2 shipments, these were not lifestyle drugs. These were maintenance drugs headed for folks in Miami whose average age was around 80. Things like blood pressure medications, cholesterol medications, blood thinners, prostate medications, and respiratory medications such as Singulair. And so in June of 2011, Strempler was indicted for conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud and 2 substantive counts of mail fraud. Now, Strempler was outside the reach of our jurisdiction, and so we figured we would never see him again, because in 2006, the Bahamian authorities conducted a raid of the pharmacy that they were using for their operations in the Bahamas, and he ended up selling the company. And so 5 years later, we thought we'd never see him again. Well, he traveled from one country in South America to another, which just happened to transit through Miami, and the indictment we had already filed, and so he was picked up. After some contentious negotiations, Strempler agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud under 18 U.S.C. 371. He was sentenced to 4 years in jail, paid a restitution of $300,000 and a criminal fine of $25,000. I mentioned before that at CPB we travel a lot. We work with U.S. attorneys' offices throughout the country. And we worked hand in hand with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida, with AUSA Andy Martinez, with FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, and a host of other international law enforcement officers. In the Bahamas, we worked with the Royal Bahamas Drug Enforcement Unit. They conducted the raid. They also had individuals from the Bahamas National Drug Agency, who was there to help us identify, along with the industry, what was counterfeit, what was not. Strempler, his organization was more than just Canada and the Bahamas. Shipments were also seized in the United Kingdom, which we had ties with the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Authority. And also in Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police conducted interviews on our behalf and provided us with documentary evidence. And we enjoyed exemplary informal cooperation with those entities. It wouldn't have been possible to carry the prosecution and receive the sentence that we did to basically to get such a good result, to bring down an organization that part of it was based in Canada, the fulfillment was in the Bahamas, and it was sending through their operations entities in the United Kingdom as well as the Netherlands Antilles. And so it was a joint effort, and we're very grateful for those organizations to help us out, and we were very happy to get a good result in putting Strempler away.
Thanks, Roger.
And that's what I've got. Thanks, Chuck.
Yep.